Well, General Obasanjo raised a lot of issues, including non-remittance of revenue by NNPC, and we want to separate today the messenger from the message this Thursday and concentrate on the content of the letter with a view to chart the way forward. We're joined by Dr. Emeka Okengwu, development expert. You're welcome again, Doctor. Good to have you. And Dr. Tivu Buzo, President, Institute of Strategic Management, Nigeria, is also here with us. It's good to have you.
Gentlemen, nice to have you join us this morning. Dr. Buzo, let me start with you. Now, so many people have argued that, the country is looking at the messenger rather than the message. But honestly, is it possible to separate the messenger from the message?
I think the debate, since the letter became public knowledge, shows clearly to us again that a message and messenger are interwoven. And the kind of person who gives a message, determines how the message is received by people. I think that one has come out very clearly. And I think it also tells us clearly that whatever we are doing, people are watching. And records are being taken. So we should be careful about what we do and what we say. If you look at it, even though people have been focusing on the messenger, very few things are new in the message. So the personality, the positions that people have occupied in the past also brings prominence to their messages. So I think these are, but clearly it's very difficult to separate a messenger from a message. But when the issues are very important, as this is, and if you want to really benefit from it, then you do make a conscious effort to separate the message from the messenger, especially if the content of the message has strategic importance and value to you or your country.
Dr. Okengwu, are you on the same page?
Well, I'm slightly on a different page because first and foremost, everybody's talking about the message or letter. I'm talking about the declaration of hostility. And I'm talking about the declaration of hostility to what we can call our corporate representation as Nigerians. Okay, because what President Jonathan means is that me and you are Nigerians. So when you write a letter and address it to the Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces, you are actually now declaring hostility. And taking it from that perspective, I don't think there's a message. Okay, I think there is effrontery. More so when this messenger, let us even take it from everything he said, the very critical things that you mentioned, unremitted funds from the NNPC. The same messenger was Minister of Petroleum for over 7 years. So we should have expected that part of that message would have been, while I was minister or while I was in charge of our ministry, these are the things I was doing right that you people are not doing wrong. Okay? And then when you talk about 1,000 Nigerians being placed on a watch list, can we please make an addition of all our public officers that are high stake? Are they up to 1,000? If you put in the Senate, the House, the ministers, because the rest of us are neither here nor there. Okay, and the only people you can be able to put on a watch list is actually people who are occupying political positions in government. Now, what's my point, ladies? This also now shows there's a total and complete failure, okay, of our governance systems and structures. Because in a country that we call, an independent corporate entity, I thought that by now, whoever you were, you should have been talking to the SSS. You should have been talking to the DMI. You should have been talking to, everybody for us to be able to now unravel, because you not only now alleged, you also now said where the camp was. You actually even mentioned that these people, these trained killers, are being trained in the same place Abacha trained his own killers. So there's even a location. So instead of saying let us separate the messenger from the message, can we first and foremost define this message as a declaration of war, okay, on our corporate identity as Nigerians?
All right, Dr. Tiv, I see you shaking your head, and I have seen quite, people give, different opinions to this. He has called it a declaration of war on peace, and you have said there's so much in that letter that has been said before. It's just cliche. Now, how do you see the 1,000, persons who are supposedly, allegedly to be placed on watch list, and he has called it a declaration of war? How do you interpret that?
I think that is one of the completely new items that nobody, to my knowledge, has mentioned in the past. And in the letter, he talked about returning to the Abacha era. And I want to just make a little correction. It's not true that it's only people occupying political positions that are placed on political watch list. During the Abacha regime, many of us, human rights activists, were placed on political watch list. In fact, I had an encounter when I was coming from Tanzania in 1999, immediately after I returned to civil rule. And they held me at the airport for 1 hour, drilling me. Have you been involved in failed bank? I said no. Have you been involved in drugs? I said no. So they were trying to just ask me all kinds of questions until somebody who was on our team said he's a human rights activist. I said, you will have told us. So, our names were there, were on a political watch list, and we're not criminals. So this allegation is a return to that, and that is, for me, that is the most scary of all the allegations. And I think that as a country, we must take the issues that are raised very seriously. We have said clearly that if you remove President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's name from that letter and put Obasanjo's name,
it will fit.
It will fit. And you will get more deadly examples during his own regime. So that is not the issue at all. Because what is happening in the country is that there is intra-class crisis. There's crisis among the ruling elite on how to appropriate and use power and resources.
All right, so...
And so, and it's amazing because why it is more important to take the issue seriously is that this is an ex-president. Some of the things either is just clear misinformation or mischief, or they are weighty issues that need to be looked at. Take, for instance, the issue of training snipers. We know that the security agencies constantly train people on how to shoot. You get the point? So it shouldn't be an issue. But when you link it to political motivation, then it becomes an issue that needs to be discussed. Right. If you look at the issues raised in the letter, they border on politics, economy, culture, and social issues. And these are the issues that every government should be able to deal with. And so for me, I think that the letter should bring another avenue to look at it, because there are genuine issues. If you talk about remitting of money, for instance, it's not new. Go and look at official government report, NIETI report.
Right. Which, by the way, the CBN governor cleared yesterday at the reconciliation meeting, where he said that first of all, there were reports that the money was missing. He said the money was not missing and that the money was unremitted. And as of yesterday, they had discovered, about 10.8 $1 billion of that money, and they just need to reconcile, the agencies involved need to reconcile their accounts and come out with it. But still talking about security, just like you said, what's new in that letter is a training of 1,000 snipers and the clandestine acquisition of weapons. Now, how is the nation and everyone concerned? How can we deal with this issue of 1,000 snipers?
What you might consider new in the letter for me and you as Nigerians is that we don't have a stake in our geopolitics. That's what's new in the letter. What's new in the letter is that who you decide to lead you or rule you does not matter. What's new in the letter is that we still have this military hangover. Because when somebody now says to you, we decided you're not going to go for a second term, what the person is saying to you is to hell with the constitution that allows you a second term. That's what's new in the letter. Because every other thing that is in the letter can be dealt with oversight expectations. There is nothing there that you've put in that we cannot be able to deal if you have a proper oversight, program. That's one. Two, and even equally more challenging, okay, is the fact that somebody can wake up in a country and then begin a letter by saying, I know I'm ready for whatever backlash that this is going to bring, and I'm saying this to you before it's too late, and begins to now remind him that you told me in the past that apart from God and your father, I've played and I've kept telling you it is God that used me to be able to use you to unify this country. I think that is what I call the insult on the collective will of us as Nigerians. Let me tell you this. When somebody does right, we are not here to defend or protect Jonathan. We are here to defend and protect ourselves as Nigerians. And anybody who attacks that office is attacking our collective freedom. And this is what everybody must take into, and that is what is new. What is new is that if we don't, what you're just simply trying to say to us now is, let's not go to Obasanjo. Everybody, has a story. I mean, in the past 1 week, you guys have been dealing Obasanjo. Everybody now has an opinion of what the man has said. And that's why I said to you, if we leave that thing as a message and probably begin to see it as a declaration of hostility, then it begins to now make you ask a question. Can we look at our electoral system? Can we look at our governance structures? You're talking about CBN. In a country that is civilized, the CBN governor would have resigned. That's the proper thing for him to do. Because you're talking about remittance and not remittance, you clearly said that the money was missing. And this NNPC has come out to say, we meet on a monthly basis. So how come you're writing this letter and this letter is getting leaked to the public? The proper thing that for us to do is to begin to first and foremost deal with issues of integrity. You don't come in one breed and say, okay, we're reconciling. And then you now want to now protect probably some image of yours by saying, okay, but I wasn't so wrong. There was still some, we have not been able to reconcile. If you understand how the oil system works and the 5 accounts that they run, their equity crude, their MPDC equity account, and all that, most of these accounts are with the CBN. So what does that also show you? It shows you there's some lacuna also in the structure, governance structure of even the CBN itself. So what's new? Sorry, ladies, it's very simple. That Nigerians must now begin to now look at those we call excellencies and those we call honorables and what they mean for our collective good. Because these guys are protected in their high walls. Probably, built with monies, we don't know how they got. The day you have a crisis here, it is me, you, your brothers, your husbands, your sisters that are going to be attacked. Us. So until all of us march and say, we are not interested in both the message and the messenger. We are interested in having a governance structure that makes messages and messengers like this very, very inconsequential.
All right, now, Dr. Tove, he's broken it down into bits. First of all, he says it's not about the message or even the messenger, it's about the governance structure. I remember that it's a quote by Abraham Lincoln. He said, the great concern is not that I have failed, but that whether I'm content in failing. and he looked at some of the problems that were happening in the United States at that time. Now, I'm going to read page 6 of 10, just a paragraph, and there's a place Obasanjo wrote. He said, the Yoruba adage says, the man with whose head the coconut is broken may not live to savor the taste of the succulent fruit. He said, those who advise you to go hard on those who oppose you are worst enemies. Democratic politics admits and is permissive of supporters and opponents. And we have seen the crisis in parties, from the middle of this year to almost towards the end, new PDP, APC, the stories are divergent. Now, as somebody who's into transparent Nigeria, how do you begin to look at the content of the letter as to what's really happening in the polity and the general feeling of the populace?
I think what is said in that passage, the first part of this is like threat, which I don't subscribe to, but the later part about the fact that democratic politics requires opposition is very, very true. I think it was my friend Oroto Douglas who did an analysis of when people were calling President Goodluck Jonathan clueless. He did an analysis, and more than 10 times the President of the United States have been called clueless. So it's not true to say that if you criticize the president, it's declaration of war. That is the type of politics we are playing, which makes consolidation of democracy difficult. In other climes, freedom of expression is allowed as far as you are civil about it. You don't abuse people, you don't libel people. You can disagree with the president, and it's not a declaration of war. It is important that we must, and I think this is the challenge we see. I think it was Jibril Ibrahim who was writing recently and talked about the challenge of opposition politics in Africa. And because the word opposition in many languages is translated to mean enemy. But in a normal democratic system, opposition is an alternative. And to criticize president respectfully, it cannot be said to amount to declaration of war. That's why I don't also subscribe to the view that there are no issues. Anybody who is living in Nigeria today and say there are no issues in terms of security, in terms of politics, in terms of social values, in terms of culture, which the later live, then we must be living in different countries. There are clear issues. Even the president himself recognizes that there are issues in this country. Those issues need to be dealt with. Take the security issue, for instance. They later raised security issue and talked about how to deal with security issue with carrot and stick and not just military. That is elementary. But if you look at what is happening today in the country, you will notice that the federal government, for instance, has a comprehensive strategy of counter-terrorism, which has different, different strategies to deal with it, not just military. But the challenge in this country is that, first, when there are strategies and policies, people don't know about it. For me, that is ignorance. That the president does not even know the comprehensive strategy that has been put in place to deal with terrorism. The second challenge is the fact that even when the strategies are put in place, the actions you see do not correlate. And so citizens are at a loss what is the true strategy is. But I know that there is a comprehensive counter-terrorism strategy that is not just military. It deals with dealing with the hearts and mind, the kinds of education, reorientation, and all of that. But you will not see such discussions in public domain, in television, in newspapers. And that's one other challenge we face in this country, which the letter also brings to the fore, that there is too much emphasis on personalities, on politics, without looking at development issues. That's why we are in the quagmire we are. If you look at the country, you will notice that since return to civil rule in 1999, there has been enormous economic growth from between 6 to 8%. But at the same time, the number of poor people is increasing. And there are no concrete programs and policies across the country to lift people out of poverty. So there are issues in this country that the political elite, that the citizens need to deal with, which I think is very germane.
Okay, let's deliberately now look at each of these issues very, very clearly. We've talked about the 1,000 persons who allegedly are being trained in snipers and acquisition of clandestine weapons and all of that. We've also talked about, Dr. Igbuzo has mentioned the tackling of the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria. Has it really been tackled the way it should by this administration? So let's look at corruption in itself, which is the bane of development in this country. We all know that. Now, would you say would you say that this administration has handled the issue of corruption, bearing in mind that the way it should, bearing in mind that over and over again there seemed to be a shielding of people, officials, public office holders who have been fingered in major corruption scams. Recently, we've seen how the issue of 255 million naira spent on 2 armored vehicles for the Minister of Aviation, how that went. We saw a situation where the presidency came up and inaugurated a committee to look into the matter rather than EFCC coming in as the agency to handle these issues. And a lot of people have argued that that is a shielding of someone who has been fingered. What do you make of this administration's fight against corruption?
Part of what it is I do for a living is that I do a lot of development work. And at some level, I was involved in that, I'm involved in the aviation thing. I've severally come here to say to you that the issues of corruption in Nigeria is that corruption is backed by legal frameworks. Before Stella Odua came back into the country, at one time people said she had run away. And all she needed to go to do in the House of Reps was to bring evidence that she had said to somebody, do the needful. And that doing the needful meant that the person was supposed to now know at that level that due process was supposed to have been followed. What am I trying to say? Until you are able to get into position and place a governance structure that begins to allow for people to stop corrupt practices before they start them, you can never be able to deal with corruption. This is very important. You see, sometimes when I come on national television, I want us to talk about us as Nigerians, because we are Nigerians. And a lot of us are a lot older now. Some of us are in our 50s, and we have had the benefits of this country when it ran a little better. And why I'm a little bit, I have come here severally, and each time I come here, I'm not a PDP carrying person, I'm not interested in politics, I'm a development person. I want to deal with these issues of development the way they are. Now, for us to begin to now say that a man who had 8 years to set up structures, a man who actually now set up the structures that are now yielding what it is we are reading today, can actually now go back and sit down and write about the same things. Write about a ministry he ran for 8 years. Write about a country he has been president for at least 12 years. Is a little bit of taking it out of context. So if we are trying to focus on what the letter or the declaration to me says, I think we should get a little bit unemotional. Let us even start with Abacha. The PTF that was established by Abacha, Senami, was the only framework that made every Nigerian pay tax without knowing they were paying tax. And take it or leave it, the PTF made certain there was no nook and cranny of this country you were not getting PTF intervention. And it wasn't government funding. How many Nigerians know that? That all you needed to do was walk into a filling station, buy fuel for 11 naira, and 3 naira was going to the fund because government had added 3 naira. The same Abacha was the person that built the National Hospital. But when you talk about a system and you talk about people now wanting to push towards democracy, of course, the civil society, fellas, helped us. It's on record that a lot of them helped us to be able to get to what it is, where people now say we are now in civilian rule, we have not got into a democracy. So let us be able to separate it. What's the difference between civilian rule, a democracy, and a military rule? So in saying that, what am I trying to say? That's what I'm saying. Can we be able to first and foremost focus on the institutions of government that would have made certain that this letter would have been inconsequential? And question number one would have been, if CBN and NNPC, they were meeting on a monthly basis, and we had a seamless, you have a lot of things in our oil sector. You have what they call tanker takeover. You have what they call a Togo triangle. You have what they call agent fees and all that. Do you know why that's happening? Because out of all the OPEC countries, it's only our country that is still into partnerships with multinationals that are producing and selling and giving us back our crude. So these are issues. Let us stop playing to the gallery and face what the issues truly are.
Now, Dr. Okengwu, just still on you before I come to Dr. T.
Yes.
You've spoken about war on peace through the content of this letter, and rather it shouldn't be about even both the messenger and the message. Now, the great Nelson Mandela, may he so rest in peace, also did an interview in 2007 with Dr. Baba Hakim, and he also spoke about Nigeria not in very favorable terms. And I quote him, he said, "I am not very happy with Nigeria, and I've made this clear on many occasions." He went ahead to say, "Your leaders have no respect for their people. They believe in their personal interest, and the personal interest is of their people. They take people's resources and turn them into personal wealth." He says, "There is a level of poverty in Nigeria that should not be acceptable. I cannot understand why Nigerians are not more angry than they are." And this is Nelson Mandela speaking about Nigeria in not such a favorable. Would you say this is a declaration of war and peace?
Why? An Igbo girl. You know when an Igbo man tells you Bawai, it simply means cure ED. This is Bawai. This is what the problem of this country is. Okay? Nelson Mandela was president of South Africa. South Africa is 10 times richer than Nigeria can ever be. Go and look at the history and records of South Africa. The president of South Africa, if you know him, he's of no consequence to you, because they have structures that make it impossible for anybody in government to be able to influence anything for you. The best they might be able to do is to create what they call the BEE programs and probably help you get into what it is you need to do through a BEE program. What am I saying? What it is we've failed to do in this country is that each time leaders are fighting, somebody says, "Oh, we're for Obasanjo," another person says, "Oh, we're for Jonathan." And by the end of the day, it is me and you. All of them walk away, clean as a whistle. Both of us will now start clashing. Today, there's a letter from Obasanjo. As much as the ex-president has said it wasn't Iyabo that wrote it, Iyabo hasn't come out to say it wasn't her that wrote it. And there's a line in that letter that is very instructive. And let me tell you what it is. He says, you cannot entice me with a senatorial seat for the APC. I am old enough. Do you ask me what I want? I am old enough to know what I want.
All right, Dr. Let me come to Dr. Tiv. I'm sure that, over the days that have passed, Iyabo has also come out, with a letter saying she may not have written it, but that's still unconfirmed and is still being looked at. But looking at those words from Nelson Mandela, the content of this letter sounds like cliche. And, he's called it a declaration of war on peace, perhaps because of the messenger and perhaps of the message involved. How do you rate this? This was written in 2007.
In fact, ironically, I read that letter this morning on the internet, and I think, like my colleague said, I agree with the content of that letter completely. You see, we have huge problems in the country. Problem of leadership and followership. We have problem of corruption and impunity. And we have problem of institutions not working. And when you want to deal with a problem of corruption, for instance, I hold the view completely that the governments, whether Obasanjo's government, whether Goodluck Jonathan's government, have missed it completely on the fight against corruption. Because corruption is not made in Nigeria. Corruption is a global phenomenon. And it has been shown conclusively that wherever you find discretion, wherever you have lack of transparency and accountability, you must see corruption. And so you will expect that in a country that has been consistently rated as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, that the strategy for fighting corruption will be holistic. But one of the challenges we've seen, and I see it, even commentators, everybody make that same thing, is focus on anti-corruption bodies. You can't fight, if you look at the level of widespread nature of corruption in Nigeria today, you will know that the best way to fight corruption is to strengthen the systems, is to remove discretion, and make it difficult, if not impossible, for people to engage in corruptible transactions. But what we've seen is that even when anti-corruption bodies fight, from where we see it, unless they have information that we don't have, we see it as selective, we see it as not comprehensive, we see that there are certain things when they are published in the newspapers, we think that these are issues that the anti-corruption agencies should follow up immediately. We don't see action, whether Obasanjo's regime or Goodluck Jonathan's administration. So the point is that, and I think for me, when we say separate the message and focus on the issue, that's why I think that way it is important. Our country is facing political, economic, social, and cultural problems. We must find ways to deal with these problems strategically.
Dr. Guzo, we don't have time, unfortunately. We have to round up now. But before we go, the letter indirectly described the president as an ethnic chauvinist. Is there anything that will make you think that, yes, Obasanjo is probably right in that regard? Also, one last thing as well is that he wanted the conversation of President Goodluck Jonathan on national dialogue is fraught with danger and disunity. What do you make of those allegations?
Well, first, in the question of national dialogue, I think that dialogue in a democracy is a necessity. The challenge that people have had with this national dialogue, which I also have with it, is the timing. Election is due in about 12-13 months' time. And the kind of dialogue which we have advocated for over the years is a dialogue that will lead to fundamental restructuring of the country. And if that dialogue will lead to that, where is the time to do the restructuring, to do a new constitution, to do a referendum, to have a good process? And with the benefit of hindsight of previous dialogue, for instance, even Obasanjo's dialogue with National Political Reform Conference, that there were a lot of issues that were raised, but because of his 10-term agenda, the whole dialogue. That's why people are skeptical about dialogue. Using ethnicity as a basis of analyzing politics has been the stock in trade of politicians in Nigeria. Ethnicity and religion. The ironical thing is that many of them are not spiritual or religious people. Many of them, even the common thing of going to church every Sunday, Some of them only go to church when they have a ceremony, unless they are in a position they have to go to church for the cameras. So I personally do not think that using ethnicity and religion is a way of just putting the people perpetually.
But do you think that the president is, that's the question, if the president really, Obasanjo is right to describe him as an ethnic chauvinist?
I don't think Obasanjo is right.
Okay, all right.
All right. Finally, Dr. Emeka, before we go, and I'm trying to give analysis of several letters to actually get insight, to what the feelings of the general populace is like. I remember this letter written from the civil society group to Barack Obama in November 11th, 2013, and they called it the Voices of America. And one of the paragraphs read, "We denounce the particularly opaque and exclusive nature of recent trade negotiations and insist that negotiating text be released to the public for the interest of the economy of every United States citizen." And this is a letter coming directly. They've not been nice and complimentary about their choice of language or word. This is the voice of anger. And the question is, regardless of all the emotions and the sentiments surrounding this letter, what should be the lessons to learn from this, and what's the way forward with all of this?
Lesson number one is that there are two camps now: the cabal and the people of Nigeria.
The cabal?
Yes. Lesson number two for the president, if him and his handlers are listening, is that there is a disconnect between him and the people who put him there. Lesson number three, which is most important, is that the president should get into town and let people begin to feel him. Lesson number four is that there has to be what you call inclusive growth. And until the president is able to solve the issue of that inclusive growth, where somebody in Imbi, say, has the same access to somebody in Maiduguri, these people will keep making a lot of noise. I tell you this because I don't have a lot of time.
Maybe we should leave it at those lessons. They are quite instructive. I see Dr. Ibuzo nodding his head. He's in total support, and he concurs to that. I'm sure so are many other people.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Well, we've been talking to Dr. Emeka Okengwu, development expert, who says this is a war, of course, on peace, but definitely he thinks that there's a lot to be done still. And Dr. Tivu Buza, President, Institute of Strategic Management, Nigeria, is one man who's angry about the level of poverty. In Mandela's words, of course, is not something to be accepted by Nigerians. And like I would say, freedom of speech is also the freedom to offend people, but then the freedom of speech, at the back of the freedom is the speech. So you have the right to judge the content in your own.